All right. So this is our project on the Great Depression by Julian Flores.
Navy Fowler.
Great. So let's get into it. So how was the economy before? So though in the 1920s it seemed very wealthy, very prosperous time for America, it was there was great uh, distribution disparities. So the wealthy were just getting wealthier while the poor were just getting poorer. A lot of people felt. Uh, Also, there was a lot of Americans who had to borrow more money than they could actually afford to give back just to live. So they were borrowing a lot to buy houses or just to live in general, and they didn't have enough money to pay that back ever.
Uh, the prices for food also dropped drastically during this time. During World War II, we were a large supplier of food to our allies, our European allies, but uh, and because of this, farmers borrowed a lot of money to buy new equipment, and to buy more farmland, and they went into heavily into debt because they thought believed they would make a big profit. But when the prices drastically uh, dropped, as well as the demand for this massive amount of food dropped as well once the war ended, farmers were left with a lot of debt and a lot of extra land, and so uh, that was a huge hit to the U.S. economy at the time.
So as Avery had mentioned before, we were just getting out of World War One. Europe was in shambles. They suffered a lot from the debts that they had to repay for the war. So whether that was England and France having to pay the bankers back, or Germany having to pay France and England back under the Treaty of Versailles, they actually had to pay 132 billion gold mark, which was the equivalent of $33 billion. Um, they had to pay back a lot of money that they didn't have, and it was made when uh, when countries such as like France and England weren't buying a lot of their products, so they had to start. The state had to start. They had to start paying the people themselves just to be alive. They had to start paying, hiring workers for for uh, for everything that they could think of to start rebuilding their country. But that didn't work well enough because when the government's the only person who's hiring, it's really hard to make an economy work like that. On top of that, they were also Germany, especially, was experiencing high hyperinflation because when they were trying to pay back the gold marks, they had a brilliant idea of just making more money, but then they didn't realize that that devalues their currency and it doesn't get them anywhere. In fact, it just ruins their currency. So, on top of having to pay war reparations, they also had to just destroy the economy after that.
Uh, what was a major thing that happened? A big one being Black Thursday, which is stock market crash, a huge stock market crash in the 1929. During this time, people were it's outside of stockbrokers selling their stocks for pocket change for whatever they could get out of them, and just a massive downward spiral, and almost everyone in Wall Street that that dealt with stocks uh, lost money, and uh, some of them went completely broke. This also led to more and more Americans losing their jobs, and it all spiraled into an even larger and larger disaster. Alongside this was the Dust Bowl. Basic, with all that empty farmland as mentioned earlier, that farmers were no longer using because there wasn't that large of a demand for food. A large windstorm appeared in the southern Midwest, and it picked up all the loose dirt and small debris, which into a huge dust storm, which made the rest of the land completely uh, completely unusable to grow crops, and at the same, and in some cases even blocking out the suns. So even if by some act of God you were able to grow crops, your ground was still okay to grow crops. You couldn't, the sun wouldn't get to your plants, so they wouldn't grow in the first place. And this lasted for an extremely long time.
So why did it happen? So along with why did the Great Depression happen? So as I mentioned earlier, the war that had just happened, and as Avery had mentioned, the droughts and Black Thursday, the mass selling of shares, stock shares. That's basically what helped cause the Great Depression. Those were huge factors in it. And as we've learned in economics class, when people think something will happen in the economy, it most likely will happen. Uh, so when people think that the economy is going to take a turn for the worse, they start selling their shares so that they don't lose as much money, which then causes the economy to go down, because if people think that the market's going to crash, then people are going to try and recover as much money as they can, and that just leads into a spiraling snowball, which has a huge negative effect on everything. So yeah, as we learned, if we think something's going to happen, it will happen. And also, I wanted to get into the Federal Reserve, what part they played during the Great Depression. So the Federal Reserve, between October of 1929 and February 1930, they actually purchased U.S. securities so that they could pump more money into the economy to try and get it moving again. A lot of people, such as I believe an economist named Friedman, he wrote a book and has caused um, a lot of confusion about what the Federal Reserve actually did. But I was able to do research. I did all the research I could, and I saw they did do some things, like they bought securities and they slashed the interest rates, but a lot. I guess it wasn't enough. It didn't really help a lot. They tried to pump as much money as they could into the economy by not making people or by discouraging people from holding on to their money, but it seems like it didn't really do a lot. And I know Friedman mentions money supply contraction, but and he blames the Fed for this. But honestly, from what I've seen, it doesn't really seem like they were responsible for it. It just seems like that's what happened during the Great Depression, and maybe they didn't do enough, but I don't think they had as much power to do a lot of things that could the economy.